First, I just want to say thank you guys for everyone that's here right now. And like I was saying, and you see on the Facebook post, it's credible is us taking action. You know, it's when we sit back is when we're not that credible piece, because we're standing together to try to find solutions as a community. And that's what's missing right now. And we're kind of the example that moves forward like that, and we all share that same concern for this city. I've got 5 kids that live here, so for me, I'm invested in this city, and I believe we all are here, and that's how this all formed, is caring Anchorage citizens, and that's what we all are. We're concerned about what happens next, and want to make sure that our city is moving in the right direction, safer, more successful city as we're moving forward. So that's my part in being involved with these wonderful folks, and thankful to all the candidates for participating today. So I'm passing this on to the next person within the group.
Can't say it better than you said it. Thanks, Mel. Thank you so much for the candidates that we invited for coming out and being willing to share your thoughts on this important issue. And thank you to everyone again, like you said, for responding so quickly and taking the time out of your evening to be a part of a solution.
Hi, I'm Nisha. Thank you all for coming out again, and thank you all for the candidates. And we're glad to see the community come together as a collective who all has a concern about what's happening in our community and how we can find viable solutions as a community. Thank you again.
How you guys doing? Come on, wake up. How you guys doing, Anchorage? This is like the portion of the show, see that video where it was like a little bit of this. We are power to the, the kids were ringing true on all of our sentiments that we are Anchorage. That's kind of how we all got together, Mount Tosha and the rest of this great group of people. My name is Don Mega. I'm from Alaska's hottest hits, 92.9 KFAT and Ohana Media Group radio stations. We've got about 6 or 7 different radio stations in the Alaska conglomerate, and we were the media source as far as radio goes to help get the message out there. I was reached out to by, actually all of these folks are on my Facebook page. Everybody's got Facebook, right? This was the viable source that kind of linked us all together. One person made a Facebook post, another person inboxed another person, and so another person got added to that conversation, and so on and so forth, until we had just a motley crew of amazing individuals that came together to express the same sentiment for our city. We've got kids in this city, we work in this city, we love this city, and that's why we call ourselves We Are Anchorage. So thank you so much to all of our possible mayoral candidates that came up to visit us today and came to speak. Thank you guys for taking time out of your schedules, and thank y'all for showing up today, okay? So let's get involved. Give yourselves a big round of applause for being here. This is Miriam Aarons from Barron Strait Navy Corporation.
Soundward. Well, I think you pretty much said it all, so just want to thank you guys all for being here today, and a very special thank you for the candidates, and looking forward to hearing to what they all have to say. So thanks.
And I'm going to be real fast so we can get to the meat of this today. My name is George Martinez from the Global Block, and I want to end off with one thought. I believe that there are more people in the city of Anchorage that want to solve the problem of violence than that want to cause problems of violence. If you believe that, then round of applause. And I also believe that when people get together, we can solve the problem, and that's why we call this forum today, because your voices matter, our young people matter, and we have the chance to direct the next wave of action in the city. And we begin tonight by getting together and having this candidates forum. We thank you on behalf of We Are Anchorage.
Saving the best for last right here. No, thank you all for coming, and thank you for tolerating the little problems that we had here in the beginning. My name is EJ David. I am a professor here at the University of Alaska Anchorage. I'm also the director of the Alaska Native Community Advancement in Psychology Program, or ANCAP. And it is a pleasure to be working with this group. I'm thankful to all the candidates for joining us today, and I'm thankful to all of you for showing your support and showing that you care about our great city. Because We Are Anchorage is not an exclusive we. We is an inclusive we. We is all of us. All of us are Anchorage. So thank you for caring.
Guys, we've got some great sponsors that helped us pull this thing off. And I got to say thank you to these people really fast. Thank you so much to Global Block Collective. Also, Green Dot, Alaska. Thank you. Beacon. Thank you so much for your support. Bering Straits Native Corporation, UAA Alaska Native Community Advancement and Psychology, the ANCAP program. Of course, Ohana Media Group and all the Ohana Media Group radio stations, and First Alaskans Institute. Now, before we formally get started on the forum, guys, let's watch a very brief message from Alaska Governor Bill Walker. Hopefully it works.
Good evening and welcome to the We Are Anchorage Forum. First, I thank the members of We Are Anchorage for recognizing that enough is enough. Even in our community is one too many. The Alaskans are standing up to start the dialogue, look for solutions, and to remind all Alaskans that the violent acts of a few do not define us. Also, thank you to the members of the public who are in the audience as well. By being here, you also recognize that enough is enough. Thank you for taking part to educate yourself on this issue and for supporting We Are Anchorage's work. To encourage local enforcement and the many other organizations and individuals across Alaska who tackle the epidemic of violence on a daily basis, you are to drive out the darkness of violence in our communities. My sincere thanks and deep gratitude to you all. May God bless you and God bless Alaska.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in a warm round of applause for our first candidate, Mr. Lance Ahern. We have some extensive bios for each of these guys that are going to be posted on weareanchorage.org, but since the sound is not cooperating, I'm just going to go down the line live and introduce these guys one at a time. Also, welcome also to our panel this afternoon, Mr. Paul Bauer. Ladies and gentlemen. Also, we'd like to welcome Ethan Berkowitz. Ethan Berkowitz. Please give a warm round of applause to Mr. Dan Coffey. Please welcome to our panel, Dustin Darden. Also, please give her a warm round of applause, Miss Amy Dimbowski. Please show Andrew Hallcrow a lot of love, y'all. Put your hands together. Please welcome to our panel, Mr. Timothy Hewitt. Also put your hands together for Mr. Phil Stoddard. I introduce to you your moderator for the evening, Liz Medicine Crow.
Well, good evening, everyone. I hope you are all doing really well. And I just want to say, thank you so much for coming out on this beautiful Thursday night. It's still unbelievable to me that this is the kind of winter we're having. And it's so warm out in that sunshine. I'm pretty excited that you all decided to come in here and participate in this very important conversation. I have the pleasure of moderating the conversation this evening. This is a forum, it is not a debate, and I want to tell you a little bit about how it's going to work, and then also the candidates, so that everyone's on the same page. Each candidate will have a chance to answer a question that's asked, and they'll have 60 seconds to answer that question. They don't have to use the whole time, but they also can't go over it. And we're going to drop a question out of the rotation for each candidate that doesn't observe that rule. The questions are all in these buckets here, and EJ's going to pull the questions for us. They're all the same questions in the bucket. And so it's just a matter of random chance. Again, this is not a debate, this is a forum, so we're going to ask everyone to really involve themselves in this practice of civil discourse, for the candidates to not interrupt each other, to not jump on each other's as they speak, to pay attention to the cues from me as the moderator and Don Mega as our timekeeper. You can see the clock up here, everyone, so you can see your time ticking. And then also for the audience to also be engaged in a respectful listening dialogue as we go through the questions with the candidates. If you could mute your cell phones so that you don't throw anybody off as they're trying to really answer the question the best that they can in the very limited time that they have. They might also, because of that limited time, they might also have to stop mid-sentence. And they might not be able to complete their thought, but because they're so respectful, they're just going to go ahead and stop when that clock hits 60 seconds. And if you want to know more, please follow up with them after the forum, okay? So we're going to just keep asking questions until we hit 8:30. And then at that time, Don Mega's going to take over and he's going to facilitate a community question period, okay? Does that sound good for everyone? So with that, let's get started. We're just going to work down the line and head this way with the questions. So Lance, this one's for you first.
Okay.
The APD has had to reduce its number of property crimes detectives in half. A common understanding of those in the criminal justice system is that often people associated with thefts and burglaries are engaging in the behavior to help support illegal drug habits. What are your views of the overall effects property crimes have on our community?
Starting my timer. So my background is that I started about 10 years ago working with the Alaska State Troopers. And for the last 4.5 years, I've been helping to support APD. Clearly, I think we all agree that property crimes are an indicator of things that are going on in the community. You know, it's just kind of a first view into some of the problems that we're having. I certainly agree that APD could continue to place emphasis and resources on those kinds of property crimes to make sure that they're really keeping track of that front-end indicator. I think that one of the things that APD does well is that they do track data and publish it online, and if people aren't aware of some of those resources, they should go out and take a look at it. But I don't think that that information is actually being used to make good decisions about where resources should be deployed. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. And Paul, this one's for you, and surprise, there's a 30-second warning. Didn't know that, now we do. So, Paul, homelessness increases the likeliness of being a victim of violent crime and or exploitation. One significant problem facing Anchorage's homeless population is a lack of appropriate housing. Recognizing the imminent economic strain on the state and municipality, what is your plan to address this problem within the continuum of detox facilities, residential addiction recovery, housing first options, particularly to ensure that Carlick Manor is able to maintain operations, and affordable housing for low-income individuals?
That is a big question. That's a big question. You hear me? Okay.
Yes.
It's a complex issue, and it's something that we need to address. I know the current administration started a homeless task force in the beginning of his term, and I didn't see any kind of completion that I think we need to continue to put that task force together with a competent individual of coordinating all the nonprofits and organizations around the city to work in the concept that this organization is about on a we process. The only way with that task force, you put together to find solutions, recommendations, and then the whole key to having a mayor that follows through on this is to make sure it continues on, and hopefully when the funding comes, of course, we're going to lobby for that funding to help out on the issues.
Thank you. And Ethan, what does the issue of violence mean to you personally? And outside of your potential role as mayor, what is your personal responsibility to address it?
My family came to this country to escape violence, and the intergenerational trauma that systemic violence brings is something that you can't get away from. So for me, there's a personal component to it. The struggle against violence is also something that I worked on when I was a prosecutor in this town. I worked on it when I was in the legislature for 10 years, serving on a criminal justice assessment panel. The struggle for social justice and against violence is a family value for us at home. My wife helped found the Alaskan Institute for Justice, and so we've seen up close and personal what victimization does. And I just firmly believe that you cannot be free when you're afraid. And we all have an obligation to stand up and make this a safe community. That's why we are all Anchorage.
And Dan Coffey, this question is for you. The APD has had to eliminate or reduce several special investigative sections, including the Drug Investigations Unit, the Special Assignment Unit, and the Street Level Crimes Unit. Please tell us your view on what, if any, impact this has had on the recent increase in violence in our community.
Well, it's been a very large contributing factor. We have 323 sworn officers on the force today. When I left the assembly, we had 384. That was back in 2010. So we've lost roughly 60 officers. That just makes it impossible to keep those special units together. You don't have the manpower, the resources, the people to do the work. So we have to rebuild the police department. That's going to take probably a year and a half, 2 years. There's 2 academies ongoing now. When I'm mayor, I plan on keeping academies going on a regular and continuing basis to build the force, at least to the level of 400, where we might have an opportunity to do some community policing, and would also permit us perhaps to bring back 1 or more of those special units that would hopefully address those questions like property crimes, like the metro, and so on. If we can build the force, and if we can afford to build the force, then that's the only solution that I know we have, and it's got to be based on community policing.
Thank you. Dustin, this question is for you. Most people would agree that there is a link between criminal activity and the number of officers in a department. Please tell us your view on the link and how crime and staffing intersect.
First, I wanted to thank you all for coming out tonight after a hard day's work. As far as the link between crime and the staffing with police, I wouldn't say that necessarily they go hand in hand. Is there going to be crime with people, with the population we have? Yes. Does APD help remedy that? Absolutely. With the crime that we have right now, we need to have a solidly staffed APD unit, and in order to maintain that quality staff, we need to continue to give them benefits and wages that we can continue to recruit troops to keep them staffed. One of the reasons we have we're a little bit low is because our quality is taking a dump.
Thank you. Amy, this question is for you. CJ. You need only turn on the news in recent weeks to become concerned about gun violence in Anchorage. What is your plan for reducing gun violence in Anchorage?
There's no question, when we talk about correlation of crime and number of police officers, there's there. There is one. And my plan for reducing this is, number one, we have got to, as a community, get involved, no question. Communication is key. But number two, we absolutely have to reinvest in APD. What we see with APD is when we see overtime numbers, especially cost going up, we know we're not staffing appropriately. You know, as an assembly member, I have been advocating to bolster those numbers, but I think we have to go back to some of these specialty units, whether we're talking about the gang unit, whether we're talking about different drug units, whether we're talking about property crime. There's correlations with all of those, and we have to adequately staff our police department before we can start to address this issue. But it's not just the police. We have to get involved as citizens. We have to start engaging in these conversations. That's the way to start to address this issue.
Thank you. Andrew, this question is for you. In October 2014, the Anchorage Assembly passed a resolution naming Anchorage a Green Dot City and supporting violence prevention efforts. Prevention programs come with a cost that must be weighed against the need for additional policing and crisis intervention services designed for after violence has occurred. As mayor, how do you plan to provide support and funding to both intervention services and these critically important prevention programs like Green Dot?
Well, first off, when you look at programs like Green Dot, you have to look at it in a bigger scope. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you know, crime costs this community. Not just the victims and their families, but we're talking their neighborhoods. We're talking the business community. For instance, the violence downtown is really affecting small mom and pop operations. So, you know, violence has a cost to our society. And so when you look at some of these prevention and intervention programs, they pay off at the end of the day. And one of the things we have to look at is we have to look at when an officer arrives on the scene of a crime. Part of the problem is they spend a lot of time doing basically kind of a social outreach instead of focusing on scene stabilization. Instead of being able to come in and stabilize the scene and assess the situation, you know, they're dealing with the victim. We need to engage the nonprofits that provide some of these services, especially like domestic violence, and get them engaged in this process.
Thank you. Timothy, this question is for you. Most people would agree that there is a link between criminal activity and the number of officers in a department. Please tell us your view on the link and how crime and staffing intersect.
There's definitely a link right now in Anchorage. We have one of the highest crime rates in America for a city our size. So with 60 officers down right now, we're having trouble policing Anchorage. We can only react to crimes. And I hope in the future we can begin to do community policing and proactive policing. And begin to, first we have to get staff up high enough and continue on a reactive path and react to those 911 calls. But in the future we need to engage the community. We also need to increase minority staffing. We're a city of over 100 cultures and languages, and we need to have that reflected in our force. So that when policemen go out and stabilize these scenes, they'll be able to get witnesses to talk to them. One of the big problems now is we're having trouble getting witnesses to even tell us about murders.
Thank you. Phil, this question is for you. Domestic and sexual violence disproportionately impacts the Alaska Native community in Anchorage. First, please describe your understanding of why rates of violence are higher in this community. Then, describe how, as mayor, you would partner with the Alaska Native leaders to identify solutions to this issue.
Problem with the situation is education is the key, employment is the answer to solving violence in Anchorage. And we need to create jobs. You need jobs in order to create the financial base in order to hire more police officers. The Anchorage APD has done a superb job. The education system in Anchorage over the years has done a very good job. We need to give them the tools necessary to go to the next level, all the way from early education to the university. We need to make education #1 in Alaska, #1 in the United States, and we need to create jobs. I'll do so as mayor by creating the lowest electrical power grid in the United States. I will also invite the United States Navy back to Alaska. I will work to expand.
Thank you, Phil. Lance, this is your question. It's the same question, actually. Domestic and sexual violence disproportionately impacts the Alaska Native community in Anchorage. First, please describe your understanding of why rates of violence are higher in this community. Then describe how, as mayor, you would partner with Alaska Native leaders to identify solutions to this issue.
Sure, thank you. So, when I started working for the Alaska State Troopers, that was the first time that I really got visibility into the extent of the problem. Clearly, it's a huge statewide problem. In part, it's a major problem in Anchorage because we are the center of the state. There's so much, traffic between Anchorage and the rest of the state. It's often when we look at the nature of the problem here, there has been way too much focus, I think, at times on kind of the chronic inebriation piece of this, which is a small but visible factor in all of this. I think one of the other candidates talked a little bit about how much the high cost of housing, homelessness, the lack of good paying jobs, a working wage. I think those are all important factors that contribute to the larger problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. Paul, this question's for you. There is a lack of detox and associated substance abuse treatment options in Anchorage. There is a strong correlation between substance and alcohol abuse and incidents of violence. A significant portion of violent crimes in Anchorage have alcohol or drugs involved. The cost of first response and incarceration could possibly be reduced if detox, assessment, and treatment services were provided to at-risk individuals. Do you support funding the creation of additional detox and substance abuse treatment facilities in Anchorage?
Absolutely. An increase in services will obviously help the problem throughout the community. It's a matter of funding and where we're going to get it from. Of course, the state's going to go through their issues, but I think there's, the community needs to jump in again on the WE concept with the nonprofits and also all the cultural corporations out there to work together to develop some of these centers around town.
Thank you. Ethan, domestic and sexual violence disproportionately impacts the Alaska Native community in Anchorage. First, please describe your understanding of why rates of violence are higher in this community. Then describe how, as mayor, you would partner with Alaska Native leaders to identify solutions to this issue.
This is one of the tragedies that afflicts us not just as people of Anchorage, but people across the state. And there are structural reasons in the nature of the relationship between urban Alaska and rural Alaska. But I've seen, when I was a prosecutor, I saw people trafficked from Western Alaska brought into Anchorage. I recall individual victims who showed up in court beaten so badly they could barely stand. And there are some historic reasons for this, but in terms of trying to craft solutions, we need to look to possible co-management issues with the largest private landowner in Anchorage, which is the Klutna. We need to work with South Central Foundation. I would do things like reappoint a rural or native coordinator in the mayor's office. We cannot stand idly by while a significant portion of our population is victimized this way. And I think there are great solutions out there if we just change our way of thinking.
Dan, in order to engage the community in positive and proactive ways, studies show that police officers need to have anywhere from 35 to 50% discretionary time. This time allows them to develop relationships with the citizens they serve. As a result of the current staffing crisis at the Anchorage Police Department, Officers have not been able to have that needed discretionary time. As mayor, how would you propose to increase staffing and therefore the officers' discretionary time?
Well, the staffing of the police department for sworn officers and probably dispatch as well needs to be increased. In order to do that, you have to allocate resources to the police department. We're coming into a time where we may not have as much resources as we had in the past few years, which essentially means some things are going to have to go. Policing is job, public safety is job one, and it is going to have to be given the resources necessary to do the job. The studies are correct, but you need about 400 officers to even attempt community policing. So the first task is to build the force. The second task, and to find the resources necessary to do that. And then the second task is to work in this community policing, particularly in the more troubled neighborhoods, so that you can address some of these issues that are so obvious to all of us as we go around town. If we can do that, then we'll have a chance of making a difference over time, and that's what I intend to try to do.
Thank you. Dustin, Anchorage has a community police relations task force. Do you think this task force is working, and is it important? If you don't think it's working, why and what would you do to fix it?
The methodology that's being used by the Anchorage Police Department with community policing is effective. There's always room for improvement in everything. And as mayor, I'd encourage the APD to work alongside, hand in hand with all of y'all to boost the morale of the city. To know that police officer in your area by name, greet him in the grocery store. Not that you may already do that, but just to build that warm fuzzy feeling of we live in a pretty decent sized town, but just to build that warm fuzzy feeling of a more small town feel, and to keep communications open, transparency on both sides with public input.
Okay. Amy, homelessness increases the likeliness of being a victim of violent crime and/or exploitation. One significant problem facing Anchorage's homeless population is a lack of appropriate housing. Recognizing the imminent economic strain on the state and municipality, what is your plan to address this problem within the continuum of detox facilities, residential addiction recovery, housing first options, particularly to ensure that Carlick Manor is able to maintain operation, and affordable housing for low-income individuals?
I love this question because I've actually been working on this issue. So there's no question detox is going to be a piece of this puzzle, so is housing. But the other thing we need to engage, people will talk about the different native corporations, but one of the things we're missing, when we look at the population, disproportionately, Alaska Natives make up this. So as an assembly member, over the last couple of months, I have already been meeting with tribal elders. We're not talking about the native corporations, we're talking about tribes. These are their members. We have to start engaging these tribes. And why? Because no one has ever done this before. But the tribes have access to federal funding. They have access to mental health care. They have access to job training, revenues, sources. But we have to engage them in the conversation. When we talk about We Are Anchorage, we can't just talk about the individuals. We have to remember a big portion of our population, they're members of tribes. So why aren't they at the table?
Thank you. Andrew, you have the same question. Homelessness increases the likeliness of being a victim of violent crime and/or exploitation. One significant problem facing Anchorage's homeless population is a lack of appropriate housing. Recognizing the imminent economic strain on the state and municipality, what is your plan to address this problem within the continuum of detox facilities, residential addiction recovery, housing first options, particularly to ensure that Carlick Manor is able to maintain operation and affordable housing for low-income individuals?
Well, first off, what housing works? One of the things, and you'll talk to police officers about Carlick Manor, is the calls to that area have been significantly reduced. And one of the things is that Carluck Manor has made it a policy to take care of any problems within the building. And so the police aren't called anymore. They have the incentive and the motivation to take care of their own issues. So wet housing works. What I would do with this continuum is do the same thing that I've done the last 2 years at the Anchorage Chamber of Commerce, and that's embrace the collective impact model. You've got to get all of the social services together around the table. You have to bring in the Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority that has land, state and city health agencies, and you have to attack this problem with a long view. And we're talking about having detox and rehab and job training all in one specific area. And it's proven that when you have social services concentrated in one area in downtown, in any city, you have public safety problems.
Timothy, domestic and sexual violence disproportionately impacts the Alaska Native community in Anchorage. First, please describe your understanding of why rates of violence are higher in this community, then describe how, as mayor, you would partner with Alaska Native leaders to identify solutions to this issue.
This is a long-term problem. It's a generational loss of the family network, religious and boarding school abuse, generational alcohol and drug abuse, disease epidemics. There's many causes that have happened over time to bring it to the point that it is now. I would like to see that we work with the Native leaders, try to bring some pride to the Native culture by including them in the mainstream culture. I believe the recognition of the 20 Native languages is a good start. But I would work with the Native leaders to work on some cultural identity work. We know through the Justice Center and anthropology that when we teach people about their culture, it really doesn't matter whether you're Native or who you are. When you know who you are and where you come from, it builds pride.
Thank you. Phil, in order to engage the community in positive and proactive ways, studies show that police officers need to have anywhere from 35 to 50% discretionary time. This time allows them to develop relationships with the citizens they serve. As a result of the current staffing crisis at the Anchorage Police Department, officers have not been able to have this needed discretionary time. As mayor, how would you propose to increase staffing and therefore the officers' discretionary time?
Education is the key, employment is the answer. We need to create the revenue necessary to address these problems. Everything from the police department to the education system needs funding. Native leaders, I've worked and lived all across the state. I was born in Kodiak. I've worked with leaders all across the state, and they also need revenue in order to participate and be involved. It takes money. I'll do so by creating the lowest cost electrical power grid in America, which will bring manufacturing to Anchorage. I'll also work to bring the United States Navy to Anchorage and expand the Army and the Air Force. There's lots of things we can do to create revenue here in Anchorage and create quality jobs that will solve a lot of the problem. And education itself can be an industry.
Thank you, Phil. Lance, this question is for you. There is a lack of detox and associated substance abuse treatment in Anchorage. There is a strong correlation between substance and alcohol abuse and incidents of violence. A significant portion of violent crimes in Anchorage have alcohol or drugs involved. The cost of first response and incarceration could possibly be reduced if detox, assessment, and treatment services were provided to at-risk individuals. Do you support funding the creation of additional detox and substance abuse treatment facilities in Anchorage?
I do. And at the AFACT meeting a couple weeks back, I learned a little bit more detail about some of the background. It's been very interesting to find that, for example, part of the reason why there are so few beds in this town, detox beds, is that basically we have chosen not to fund that for the last 15 years. So the municipality if you look at multiple administrations, multiple assemblies, it has not been a priority. Under me, that would be a priority. It's also not just about funding beds, but it's the after treatment programs. You have to look at the whole spectrum. All of this sounds like it could be expensive, but one of the themes I've been talking a lot about in my campaign is my experience is about reducing the cost of government. And so I've been recognized by the current mayor as a director who, for the last 3 years, has come in under budget and performed well fiscally. There is a lot of fat in city government. And if we can cut that out, the money is there to fund these kinds of things. It's not like we have to go and find other new money. There's plenty of money in city government.
Thank you. Paul, this question is for you. Many of our community strategies to address violence focus on dealing with the immediate and long-term aftermath of violence that has already occurred. But in order to effectively reduce violence, we must focus on primary prevention or stopping violence before it ever occurs in the first place. What is your understanding of primary prevention strategies, and which strategies would you prioritize for Anchorage in your role as mayor?
A lot has to do with education. Of course, our children who witness and are part of violence in the home tend to pick up that type of violence and carry it on to the outside. So education is very important for those preventive strategies. And as mayor, again, it's about bringing together folks and having a public education process that will fan out to every institution, including our schools, that would address preventing the violent behaviors that stem from working out in the community. So I think the school district needs to be part of that. As mayor, I would of course invite them as part of a task force to keep this program going.
Thank you. Ethan, in order to engage the community in positive and proactive ways, studies show that police officers need to have anywhere from 35 to 50% discretionary time. This time allows them to develop relationships with the citizens they serve. As a result of the current staffing crisis at the Anchorage Police Department, officers have not been able to have that needed discretionary time. As mayor, how would you propose to increase staffing and therefore the officers' discretionary time?
I just hired more cops. We didn't plow any snow this year. There's a lot of money out there. Let's just hire more cops. I don't know why that's such a big deal. You know, there's a study that's been done. This is the 2009-2013 strategic plan for the Anchorage Police Department. All these things that we've been talking about, they're old ideas. They know how to do this stuff. Let's just follow the recipe in here. What we need out of a mayor is someone who's got a vision for how we can make this a safe, secure, and strong city. And just doing things the way we've been doing them isn't going to work. If you want to have community policing, if you want to have a police force that looks like the community, that interacts with the community, that helps the community, we've just got to be a little bit more aggressive and do the things we know how to do. And so this isn't rocket science. This is basic management.
Many of our community strategies to address violence focus on dealing with the immediate and long-term aftermath of violence that has already occurred. But in order to effectively reduce violence, we must focus on primary prevention or stopping violence before it ever occurs in the first place. What is your understanding of primary prevention strategies, and which strategies would you prioritize for Anchorage in your role as mayor?
Well, obviously primary prevention has a key role, because I understand from the reading I've done most recently in response to this questionnaire is that if children have safe, stable, and caring environments, then the risk of continuing violence is diminished substantially. And so what you hope to achieve is that, but it becomes intergenerational. If violence occurs in this home, then it occurs in the next home, and it's just a continuum, almost like a disease in one way. But if you have those experiences and where you're safe and warm and protected and nurtured, then that diminishes. So it's part of an education process. It's part of an effort to make sure that you break the cycles of violence. And in order to do that as a mayor, you need to engage the community, and community solutions have to come out of that engagement. And it's a broad-based thing, and we have many, many organizations that are currently attempting to do this. And the degree of success will depend on the degree of commitment which we make to trying to accomplish that.
Thank you. Dustin, this question's for you. In order to engage the community in positive and proactive ways, studies show that police officers need to have anywhere from 35 to 50% discretionary time. This time allows them to develop relationships with the citizens they serve. As a result of the current staffing crisis at the Anchorage Police Department, officers have not been able to have that needed discretionary time. As mayor, how would you propose to increase staffing and therefore the officers' discretionary time?
We got to start getting creative and thinking outside the box. I got to be straight up with you. Money's not just flying out of the sky, for us to spend at will. For us to come together as a community, we're going to have to dig deep, and I'm all about volunteerism. When we're good to reach these, to bridge the gap between the community and the APD, it's going to be about digging deep and doing stuff like we didn't do before. We're going to need creative ideas to get through what we're coming into. Yeah, there's definitely something really cool going on in the days that we're living in, and it's not just me that's feeling it. I feel like it's spreading all over town, and I feel like that the ideas inside of all your guys' hearts are coming to the surface, and I look forward to hearing them when I serve you as mayor.
Okay. Amy, this question is for you. Many of our community strategies to address violence focus on dealing with the immediate and long-term aftermath of violence that has already occurred. But in order to effectively reduce violence, we must focus on primary prevention, or stopping violence before it ever occurs in the first place. What is your understanding of primary prevention strategies, and which strategies would you prioritize for Anchorage in your role as mayor?
Well, it's nice to talk about primary prevention. When we're talking about education, when we're talking about, domestic violence, when we're talking about all these different things, you have to identify first what's the issue. But, prevention is not going to serve us alone. We absolutely, the number one thing I have been saying that's facing the city of Anchorage right now is APD staffing. That is the number one issue we have. There's a lot of other issues on the table, absolutely. But when we're identifying prevention issues, or we're identifying different areas that we can invest in, whether it's education, treatment, domestic violence, alcohol abuse, whatever those issues are, we cannot deal with that alone. It has to be an investment in APD. And that means additional staffing, that means bringing back specialty units. We have got to do that first. We have got to. And when people start talking about funding, I'm here to tell you right now, I sit on the Anchorage Assembly, and I'll bet you each a piece of pizza that we're going to have a surplus this year. We can do this, but this has to be our priority. Has to be.
Thank you. Andrew, you need only turn on the news in recent weeks to become concerned about gun violence in Anchorage. What is your plan for reducing gun violence in Anchorage?
Well, I think it's been more than recent. I mean, certainly over the last few years as president of the chamber, I've seen it downtown, and I've seen it escalate downtown and around town. And the key has to be a multiple-pronged approach. I mean, the first thing is you have to staff up the police force. There's no question. But aside from that, education. I mean, we have to make that link, and over the last 2 years, I've been the chair of the 90% by 2020 initiative that's gathered education leaders around the table. And so suddenly, for the first time in history, you have Campfire talking to Boys and Girls Club, talking to Junior Achievement, you have the pre-K people talking to the university, and we have to realize that it starts with education. And we also have to realize that when you talk about public schools, and that's where 93% of the kids in this city attend, public schools, when you talk about education, you have to start to realize that there are factors outside the four walls of school that have a significant impact on education, and those have to be addressed for a healthier community.
Thank you. Timothy, this question is for you. It's the same question. You need only turn on the news in recent weeks to become concerned about gun violence in Anchorage. What is your plan for reducing gun violence in Anchorage?
That's the priority of my campaign is to bring a public safety initiative to Anchorage that focus on community policing and proactive policing. Right now, Mark Mew is working a Safe Streets initiative from the past where you focus hotspot areas in town where gun activity is already going on and pull over people and if they're a felon or wanted, arrest them and look for guns in their cars. Also ask for voluntary cooperation to search cars. So we need to use technology and policing strategies where we can identify the hotspots like downtown and begin to patrol those areas. I would like to see beat cops in that area to stop the bar break violence with guns. We know the guns are out in the cars. Really, the bar managers tell us that the guns aren't getting inside the bars. So they go outside, get their gun, and shoot them. But we need to have police downtown to stop this and identify those areas. We did it before with you. Thank you.
Phil, this question is for you. Many of our community strategies to address violence focus on dealing with the immediate and long-term aftermath of violence that has already occurred. But in order to effectively reduce violence, we must focus on primary prevention or stopping violence before it ever occurs in the first place. What is your understanding of primary prevention strategies, and which strategies would you prioritize for Anchorage in your role as mayor?
Education is the key, employment is the answer. If they're working, they're not committing crimes, okay? They don't have time to commit crimes if they're working. Put them to work. Educate. Create an education system here in Anchorage that is #1 in America, all the way from early education to university education. This could be a fabulous college town. Eliminate violence. Give them employment. Put them to work.
Thank you. Lance, this question is for you. The APD has had to eliminate or reduce several special investigative sections, including the Drug Investigations Unit, the Special Assignment Unit, and the Street Level Crimes Unit. Please tell us your view on what, if any, impact this has had on the recent increase in violence in our community.
So it's definitely had an impact. I'm actually going to branch off this question a little bit because there are two things I want to talk about briefly. One is that when you actually talk to cops and find out what their concerns are, and I would encourage everybody here to go and do a ride around with APD or even Westfield PD, what you keep finding out is that they go out and they catch the bad guys and then they're out on the street, days or weeks later. You drive around, they can point out, they can recognize all the people who've been brought in and let out. So first of all, getting control of that by working together with some of the, there's been a lot of focus on just APD, but there are partners. There's a community of people out there. There's the court system, there's corrections, there's a health department, and really it takes the whole team to really impact the problem. I'll save the second part of this for a next question. Thank you.
Paul, most people would agree that there's a link between criminal activity and the number of officers in the department. Please tell us your view on the link and how crime and staffing intersect.
Yeah, it goes back to what most of us have all been saying, increase in the police presence on the streets, but it also involves a lot of folks coming together to develop a community that's all going to work together. That means increasing neighborhood watch programs or develop new programs to get neighbors and people involved in reporting crime, even petty crime. So I believe it's the lack of presence. Criminals and gangs are going to take advantage of the lack of police if they don't see that presence out there. And they're also going to continue to go on when they know their neighbors aren't going to say anything. We got to get everybody involved. Community presence, neighbors talking with each other and sharing information.
Thank you. Ethan, there is a lack of detox and associated substance abuse treatment options in Anchorage. There was a strong correlation between substance abuse and alcohol abuse and incidents of violence. A significant portion of violent crimes in Anchorage have alcohol or drugs involved. The cost of first response and incarceration could possibly be reduced if detox assessment and treatment services were provided to at-risk individuals. Do you support funding the creation of additional detox and substance abuse treatment facilities in Anchorage?
Absolutely. You know, when I was in the legislature, I led the way on doing restorative justice and specialty courts and help treat people who were incarcerated. 80% of the folks that are incarcerated have some kind of drug or alcohol problem. Many of them have some kind of traumatic brain injury. And so there's dual diagnoses that are out there frequently. If we want to solve the problems that we're confronted with, we need to understand the people that we're dealing with. And you look at where APD does a lot of its calls. I mean, why don't we have an officer patrolling around Brother Francis? I mean, how many calls would we not have to make? How much of a savings would that generate, freeing up officers to do other things at other times? Why don't we have a first aid station there so that when there's a man down call, the first responders aren't stuck in that one place? We've got to solve the problem by looking at where the problems originate. And drug and alcohol are 80% of the problem.
Dan, you have the same question. There's a lack of detox and associated substance abuse treatment in Anchorage, abuse treatment options in Anchorage. There's a strong correlation between substance and alcohol abuse and incidents of violence. A significant portion of violent crimes in Anchorage have alcohol and drugs involved. The cost of first response and incarceration could possibly be reduced if detox assessment and treatment services were provided to at-risk individuals. Do you support funding the creation of additional detox and substance abuse facilities in Anchorage?
Provided it's done with a continuum, yes, I do, absolutely. But if you just do detox and you don't do treatment and you don't do housing, and you don't do all the things that are necessary that can possibly lead to recovery, then just detox alone isn't going to handle the problem. So it's a complex, detailed way of doing things. I worked on the Carlick Manor when I was on the Assembly, and housing first is an absolute working way in which to deal with this. But if you don't provide housing after you detox somebody, they're going to revert right back to the old behavior because they're not safe, warm, and dry, and in a protected environment. Okay, so the city is going to have to contribute some resources to this solution, and part of it is land, where you can build the housing necessary to do this, and the detox, and the treatment, and the job training, and all of these things. So if we commit to doing it, and again, it's like the police, the resources have to be there. That may mean we don't do some other things, but we've got to have the resources to do it.
Dustin, the APD has had to reduce its number of property crimes detectives in half. A common understanding of those in the criminal justice system is that often people associated with thefts and burglaries are engaging in the behavior to help support illegal drug habits. What are your views of the overall effects property crimes have on our community?
I was led to tell you all about this program called Teen Challenge. I know this guy named Todd White, and he was hooked on meth, crystal meth, and during a drug deal, he got shot at point blank with a 9mm gun, and he found that God told him that he stopped those bullets and he didn't die, and now he's preaching the gospel all over the world. His name's Todd White, and I've never seen a guy like him before, just so on fire for the Lord. But as far as drugs and thefts, yes. When you get possessed by things that are making you do like atrocities and evil, I completely do not tolerate that, and which is one of the reasons we do need to in fact have a solid police force, which we do have. APD's the most, I know them, I work with.
Thank you. Amy, the next question is for you.
Give me a good one.
Well, now that you said that. Mental trauma from exposure to violence has been scientifically shown to increase a person's risk of adopting violent behavior themselves, meaning that violent behavior transmits and spreads based on exposure. What are your thoughts on responding to violence as a public health epidemic? Should the health sector be involved in violence prevention?
I did not want this question, but that's okay. I wanted Ethan's question. We'll get there. You know, obviously, I'm not going to say that violence is a public health epidemic. Do I think that exposure to violence might lead to propensity of violence? Absolutely. Studies have shown that to be accurate. But it comes back to personal responsibility. I mean, when we have, as a community, and the person has to take responsibility for their actions, no question. But as a community, we have a moral obligation to help people that are mentally ill. So when we start talking about these issues, you know, when we talk about homeless, when we talk about mental illness, when we talk about violence, we have to identify those who need help, honestly. And we have to make sure that help is available to them, no question. But what we also know, when we look, people can't be forced to be institutionalized. So people have to want to be helped. Well, in some instances they can, but people have to want to be helped. We have to make sure those services are available to them, no question. You know, but it goes back to what is our primary responsibility here, and it's to protect the public. We have to have services available, we have to adequately fund it, but we have to have our priorities in line. And that first starts with personal responsibility with each and every one of us.
Andrew, as mayor, I'm curious how you plan to incorporate mental health, behavioral health services as an avenue for addressing violence in Anchorage.
Well, excuse me. I think it's a huge issue, and I think not only mental health, I think the exposure to violence is huge. One of the things you'll remember in January, where there was that really tragic scene where there was a man and woman shot in an apartment. And when I read the news story, the one paragraph that jumped out at me the most was that there were 5 kids in that apartment when that shooting happened. 5 kids. And the question I first asked myself is, what happens to those kids? What is their life like after that? And that's a common occurrence. When you go to the Council on Domestic Violence's website, there's a number there about the percentage of 3-year-olds that witness violence against a parent in a house. And the number is incredible. And those are kids that in a few years are going to show up at kindergarten and enter the public school system. And so we have got to get back to really taking a look at the impact of violence on kids and really addressing that through education and through leveraging nonprofits that are already doing good work.
Timothy, do you think the APD personnel reflects the community of Anchorage?
I think they've been doing a good job on that. We have more minorities in the police department, but as we know with like Ferguson and other areas, if we don't start to begin to address that problem a little bit more in depth and start to really recruit hard from local people in our community, from different cultural groups, we're going to continue to have problems. So no, I don't believe it's fully staffed with the minority people we need. I also believe the coming academies need to focus on community and proactive policing within the academy. I don't really know what they're focusing on. And so we need to bring more minorities on board so that we can have a better community and have an understanding in the community between the police and community. If we don't do this, we're going to continue to see problems. We don't really know if that's a variable in the crime that we're having, the diversity, without having it in the police department. So we will have to see, but I believe we should continue to do that.
Thank you. Phil, homelessness increases the likeliness of being a victim of violent crime and/or exploitation. One significant problem facing Anchorage's homeless population is a lack of appropriate housing. Recognizing the imminent economic strain on the state and municipality, what is your plan to address this problem within the continuum of detox facilities, residential addiction recovery, housing first options, particularly to ensure that Carlock Manor is able to maintain operation, and affordable housing for low-income individuals?
I've watched Anchorage grow for the last 64 years. We've gone from 25,000 to 300,000. I'm telling you, the problem can be solved with education and employment. We need to create the jobs and bring industry to Alaska. We can do that. All we have to do is simple little things like lowest cost power grid in America. Make education #1. Off-the-shelf technology that the U.S. Navy uses will give us a low-cost electrical power grid. It's not rocket science. I just came from the Aleutian Islands about an hour and a half ago, so I'm losing my voice. I've spent hours flying to get here for this, but I support all the Native organizations throughout the state.
Thank you. Lance, this question is for you. What role do you think education plays in youth-perpetuated violence?
Well, sometimes there's negative education, so learning things that we'd probably prefer you didn't learn. I'm going to just jump off for a second and say a little bit, addressing the question about about whether or not the police force reflects the community. I think we have a very, very professional police force, and I think they do a great job out there. I think the real issue is that when they're very understaffed, it creates a lot of stresses in the community, and then some of these questions start to come out that wouldn't normally come out. In terms of education, I can just tell you from personal experience, I've raised a son who is a nephew because of family situations. I think many of us get exposed to those situations. And, you know, sometimes what you have to do is just spend a lot of hands-on time, you know, helping people to unlearn some of the things that they've learned. And I think it just takes personal involvement from all of us in the community to address some of that. Thank you.
Paul, have you met with Police Chief Mew to ask about APD's actual needs?
No, I have not. When I was on the Anchorage Assembly, although I did challenge Mr. Baggage to work on more of the gang violence, gang issues that were coming up at the time from 2005 to 2008. I was the chairman of the Public Safety Committee on the Assembly, and gangs happened to be my priority. But no, I have not talked to you recently. I do keep up with all the issues that are happening. I was the commandant of the Alaska Military Youth Academy where I dealt with at-risk youth, and there was an effort there at the time when I was commandant to bring those, the police and everybody involved into working with at-risk youth, which I believe is a great program that we need to expand with our community to put more kids in there. But in the future, yes, of course, I will, work with my chief as mayor. In fact, I tend to work diligently with them on a weekly basis to solve issues.
Thank you. Ethan, what would you do to encourage redevelopment downtown as a livable area for various income levels and shops such as groceries?
Well, this is a great change, of course. I think one of the things we need to do downtown is fix the 4th Avenue Theater. It's the marquee building in downtown. I don't know how we project ourselves as an appropriate tourist destination when our biggest and most famous building is boarded up. I think we need to do things like make sure we have denser, more multi-use facilities so that people who want to live maybe above a shop and have an apartment downtown can go do that. I used to hang out with a friend who lived above the Orange Door. Anyone remember the Orange Door? Yeah. Okay, well, so downtown used to have that kind of vibrancy and vitality. We need to change the look of it as well. It needs to look like a place that's going somewhere. And it shouldn't board up at night. We shouldn't roll up the sidewalks of downtown once it gets dark in, say, September, and then reopen it again, say, February. But in terms of making sure that it's more vital, we need to also address the public safety issues that are there. It's not a place to be late at night. I know people that operate restaurants there. They've been mugged outside their restaurants. That's not a safe place to be. That means we need to have more of a beat cop situation. We need to be a friendlier place, and we need to make sure that the bar break situation is dealt with and the public inebriated situation is dealt with.
Dan, what partnerships are most vital at this time in our community? Police and schools, school and parents, gang members and religious organizations, faith-based organizations, and police?
I think all of the above, if you think about it. Everybody has a role to play in some of these challenges that we face, and if you engage in the community as a facilitator, I'm talking about the city engages as a facilitator and a proponent and someone who participates and allows a lot of these solutions to come out of the communities in in ways that are supported by the communities when they come out, because they're participants in the plans. It's not a top-down solution, and it involves almost all of those entities and individuals and groups that you named. Without that sort of effort, and really the city can be, both the mayor can be a bully pulpit, and the city can and should be a facilitator of these sorts of things. And then if it comes out that way and the communities own the solutions, then they'll be participating in those solutions, and they'll have an opportunity to make those solutions actually work and effectuate the change we need to see.
Thank you. Dustin, as mayor, I'm curious how you plan to incorporate mental health and behavioral health services as an avenue for addressing violence in Anchorage.
I'm not going to shy back about what I'm about. I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe the entire Gospels. Every event that happened. I believe that we have authority over any kind of demonic spirit. And if I came across somebody who was possessed by a demon, I cast it out in the name of Jesus Christ. And I just continue to carry on what he told us to do in the Great Commission, to go out and preach the gospel to every creature. To him that believes will be saved, and to him that does not will be condemned. I can't say anything else that we need more in the time that we're living in than the good news of Jesus Christ.
Amy, do you think the APD personnel reflects the community of Anchorage?
I do. They are our community. You forgot my timer. I'll just keep going. See, I'm a politician, but I'm an honest one. What can I say? These men and women do reflect our community. Why they are our community. Some people will measure a reflection of community by race, by gender, by socioeconomic status. Not me. I measure it by my neighbor. They are our community, and I'm proud that they're our community. And since I have 30 seconds, I want to go back to Ethan's question. When we were talking about, officers and what their role is, and talking about the Brother Francis shelter, I'm sorry, but it is not APD's job to babysit the Brother Francis shelter. They have got to focus on their own. Catholic Social Services has got to step up, and they have got to police their own entity. But to go back, and just for edification, there is a first aid station at Brother Francis shelter, though it's not always staffed. It's generally volunteer staff from students from UAA. So, there are things we can do, but we have to understand the focus of policing is to police.
Thank you. Andrew, many of our community strategies to address violence focus on dealing with the immediate and long-term aftermath of violence that has already occurred. But in order to effectively reduce violence, we must focus on primary prevention, or stopping violence before it ever occurs in the first place. What is your understanding of primary prevention strategies, and which strategies would you prioritize for Anchorage in your role as mayor?
Well, I think you have to take a multifaceted, comprehensive approach. You have to become proactive. And that's not, I know we've spoken a great deal tonight about the police being proactive, but it also includes engaging the nonprofits that are doing fabulous work in these communities, and the city getting behind people like Mao Tosi, who does an amazing job in this area. Putting on after-school programs and cultural programs and events like this is where the city needs to step up. In really, what I'm worried about over the last 2 years on working on diversity issues here is about a year ago at the Chamber, we gathered the leaders of about 12 different ethnic communities around the table. And we started talking about the individual challenges that their communities have. And it was amazing because when you look at Anchorage and how diverse it's getting with the Somali population, the Sudanese population, the growing Hispanic and Korean, all of our populations are growing, but yet their needs are really all aligned. And those three needs are affordable housing, education, and economic opportunities. And so it's not just the police getting into the communities, it's City Hall backing cultural programs, it's City Hall making space available in community venues for different cultures to meet and celebrate. It really is not just the police getting proactive, but City Hall and the nonprofits getting proactive.
Timothy, what would you do to encourage redevelopment downtown as a livable area for various income levels and shops such as for groceries?
Well, that's a good question. We need to try to focus on some higher density apartments, and we don't have any groceries downtown, just over on Gamble. So we need to work together as a community and the Chamber of Commerce and business people to make the downtown a little bit more desirable. A big problem with high density stuff downtown is earthquake issues too, and the cost of building in that area. So I don't really have a plan for it, I'll admit, but I think something needs to be done. When the tourists come to town, they need to see an advancing modern downtown city. I think Ethan was right about the 4th Avenue Theater. Really can't believe that's just sitting there. It's a jewel in our city, and we should make that a priority to remodel that.
Thank you. Phil, in October 2014, the Anchorage Assembly passed a resolution naming Anchorage a Green Dot City and supporting violence prevention efforts. Prevention programs come with a cost that must be weighed against the need for additional policing and crisis intervention services designed for after violence has occurred. As mayor, how do you plan to provide support and funding to both intervention services and these critically important prevention programs like Green Dot?
I'll create more jobs than has ever been created in the Anchorage area. That would create revenue necessary. And I agree with Ethan in the 4th Avenue Theater that the 4th Avenue area needs to be redeveloped. We've had other mayors attempt to do it, but you can't fix 4th Avenue without fixing Ship Creek in that property and Government Hill. And Brother Francis, Beans Cafe, they've done a great job over the years, but we're way beyond that, and we need to restructure that entire concept and move it out of downtown. There's so much that can be done, and I have a plan for it. Education is the key, employment is the answer.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to change the format a little bit, and you'll have 30 seconds to answer this question. You're all going to have the same question, and I'm just going to pop around along the table and ask you that way. It's the same question. What is your one innovative solution to end violence in Anchorage? And I'm going to start with Dustin.
Pray. Get back to the basics. Violence isn't caused by anything else but a lack of God. Throughout history, you look at the Bible, every time we turn back to God, we prospered. Every time we turn from Him, there's calamity and trouble. We're living in that time right now. We're either going to turn to God with all of our hearts, or we're going to turn away from Him in calamity. But it's up to all of us.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask Phil, same question. What is your one innovative solution to end violence in Anchorage? 30 seconds.
Jobs. I will create more jobs than any time period in this city. I'll create hundreds of thousands of high-paying jobs.
Thank you. Ethan, same question. Your one innovative solution to end violence in Anchorage.
Just got to go back to the fundamentals and do the basics. I think we need to have a realistic understanding that we're not going to eliminate violence. But until we start to do the basic things that work, prevention,
policing, prosecution. Until we do those with vigor, we're not going to see reductions in violence. But we also have to do what you all are doing here today. Who are we? That's what we need to remember.
Timothy, what's your one innovative solution to end violence in Anchorage?
I do believe there's a spiritual element to it. Not quite where Dustin is on it, but also I believe there's a leadership problem in our country and this city. You know, we need to lead by a proper example of honesty and integrity, and bring that to the forefront. I'm going to lead that way. I'm going to show young people that we can have leaders like that. And we all need to do that as a community. We need to be good role models. There's so many things in our society that are not good.
Thank you. That was 30 seconds. Lance, same question. Your one innovative solution to end violence in Anchorage.
So all of us here innovate at home. We all have smartphones, right? The 911 system we have today does not take advantage of the tools that we could use to improve our own public safety. You could send a text message to dispatch or to the cop car that's nearest in your neighborhood. You can send a picture of whoever's bothering you. You can send your location. So if we go about doing this the way we've done this in the past, we're going to build multiple versions, very expensive versions of a very expensive system. One for police, one for fire. One of the things that I would look at doing is leading a different approach.
Dan, your one innovative solution to end violence in Anchorage.
Well, I'm going to agree with my friend Ethan that the fundamentals are critical. But then the next question we have to ask is who's got the knowledge, experience, and understanding of these things so that you can implement those fundamentals in a way that is effective. And I would believe that the time spent on the community issues that I've done over the last 17 months indicates that perhaps I might have those qualifications. Thank you.
And Paul.
Mine's easy. My answer: incorporate everyone that everyone said here.
There you go.
Violence is really the inability to handle disputes in a civil manner. So I think it really needs to go back to education in those schools, teaching life coping skills and getting our kids involved in the way we handle violence and what it's all about. What are the ramifications? What are the consequences? And those things need to be presented at the younger level all the way through the school system.
Thank you. Andrew, same question. Your one innovative solution to end violence in Anchorage.
Become Anchorage again. I mean, this is my neighborhood. I grew up here. I went to Lake Otis and Wendler. I used to walk through this parking lot after skating at the school, after school. I mean, we need to come together as a community. There's no question that over the last 5 years, this is one of the first mayors in a long time to do away with the minority community outreach. And our minority communities are growing, and they feel disenfranchised. And whether you're the business community or a growing Somalian population, you have to feel like you're engaged in the community, and that's what we need to get back to.
And Amy, same question. Your one innovative solution to end violence in Anchorage.
Well, I think, there's been a lot of good things discussed here tonight, but there's no question. There's a lot. I wish I had the answer. I wish I had it in just one. I don't. But what I can tell you is communication. We have been talking about bringing people together. We have been talking about adequately staffing our police force. We've been talking about education and prevention. All of those matter, but they start by talking with each other. They start by bringing each other in and recognizing our priorities and then executing.
Thank you. So thank you guys so much for participating in all of those questions. We're not quite done yet. Those are just kind of the end of this formal piece. As you saw, we incorporated some of the community's questions that they wrote out in the foyer from earlier. And now Don Meg is going to lead us through some questions from the audience. So, Chish, thank you so much.
Was that not informative? Give these guys a huge round of applause, please. I'm just going to jump down and walk my way around. So if you got a question, raise your hand. I'll try my best to get to you and get the microphone to you. So we'll go over here. Excuse me, young lady. She's taking notes. How you doing?
Thank you for listening to me tonight, and I really respect you for running for mayor. It's not an easy task, but My name is Lynette Marino Hins, and I've driven a cab here for 34 years. The Uber issue is very much at my heart because the drivers that don't have benefits, you know, they don't have medical, they don't have anything. And so I'm very concerned because if you slam the door shut to the, what I consider is another driving option. That's the way I look at it. And I would really appreciate that, you know, that you support the Uber issue. And thank you, Amy, for doing that, and Andrew.
So there's no question there. That was just a comment. Thank you. I'll take a question. Go ahead, sir. You're one heck of a clapper, by the way.
This question's for Amy. Amy, on a recent interview with Your Alaska Link, the local ABC and Fox News affiliate, you said that, I wrote it in the bucket, but and my phone died, but paraphrase, you basically said that you're the only one of the leading top contenders for mayor that knows what's going on in the city of Anchorage. Why do you think that is, and could you share with the rest of us, please?
Sure. I'm the only one on the assembly right now. And so, well, we can debate all day long. Yeah, I'm sharing right now, and I love the question. Thank you so much. So I currently serve on the Audit Committee. I serve on the Budget and Finance Committee. I serve on the Enterprise Committee. I serve on the Chronic Inebriate Homeless Task Force Committee. So every single day I live, eat, and breathe the issues in this community. Why? Because I love this community. So when I refer to the current issues, it's specifically saying I am the one that's in the weed every single day for every single person sitting here. That's my job. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I don't think we're here to corner them into a confrontation. I think what we're asking for now are viable questions. No, I'm already done with yours, but thank you. I'll go to another question. Go ahead.
So many of you said that nonprofits have a vital role to play in our community and talked about what that role is and how important it is or how we should work with nonprofits, but the funding for nonprofits has been categorically cut for years and it's not looking very promising. So if you're going to be engaging nonprofits, how are you planning on funding them so we have any nonprofits to serve the community? I don't know who to direct that to. I'll let Liz do it. She's been doing a wonderful job.
Anybody like to answer that? Just jump right in, I would assume.
I'll take it.
Go ahead.
Look, the last several years I've worked with a tremendous amount, dozens of nonprofits in this community, and I certainly agree with you. I mean, funding is becoming an issue. But when you have a mayor that understands the importance of nonprofits, in the cost benefits of leveraging what you do, the good work that you do on a daily basis, the city can prioritize its resources. We can align what needs to be done in this community, whether you're talking about the chronic inebriates or whether you're talking about improving public school outcomes or whether you're talking about providing daycare.
Thank you.
If the mayor is aligned, he can support you in help with resources, in help funding, help raising money.
Next time. Next question.
I work in the bars here, and I was wondering what you are going to do, and I don't know who to direct this to either, but I was asking one of the directors of the training, the cadets for APD, and he was telling me some of the stats, like by the time the 23 cadets graduate, we've already lost that many officers, and explaining to me about our crisis with staffing. And I've been outside during the shootings while I'm trying to put somebody in a cab, and people keep blaming the bars. However, there is no police presence outside to deter these violent, criminals from attacking one another. What are you going to do in order to keep us safe, those of us that are making our livings at nighttime, and those of us that just want to have fun, a little bit of safe fun at nighttime, legal fun also?
What I'll do is to not push things through like AO 37 that would have hindered the collective bargaining agreements, the rights of the APD, and just as the city as a whole, and giving adequate funding for the APD, so that they don't go and jump, they don't get trained here and then go jump to another state where they're going to get paid more. We have to stick to our fundamentals and pay a quality wage for a quality employee. We're going to continue to lose.
Mr. Berkowitz.
as you look around this room, these are the people of Anchorage. In this body of people, you don't see our police department looking anything like this. How can we improve the racial equality in our police department, number one? And secondly, can you tell me if you plan on implementing a plan to build a better police force?
We need to have a police force that is a part of the community, not that is apart from the community. And that means, in large measure, if we want to recruit and retain people, particularly when the state budget situation is as bad as it is, the best chance we have of getting people who want to be on a career path here is to recruit from the community. And so I want to aggressively recruit from all parts of the Anchorage community. I think we're diverse in our identity, but I think we're fairly united in the concept that we can be safe.
That's 30 seconds, sir. I have to cut you off. I apologize. Thank you for your answer, though. Our next question, Cody.
I'd like to ask the candidates if any of them have heard about predictive policing or have read a bulletin that the FBI put out about the efficiency it's basically a computer model with an algorithm that predicts areas of crime and has actually reduced in some areas crime by 19%. In addition to that, violence, burglary, a lot of the things that we've talked about has been targeted, and I'll let anyone who has heard of it and is interested in implementing it respond to it.
I've heard some on this, and it's a balancing act as far as implementing it without infringing on our First Amendment rights and all of our constitutional rights, I should say. That gets into data mining and into public privacy. So it's a balancing act to take an extensive amount of data and how much you want to reach into people's personal lives and how you want to implement public safety. So it's definitely something that needs thorough review before it's...
Okay, you got time? Thank you for your answer, sir. You can answer the question as well. You got 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Sure, if I could add to that. Basically, CompStat is something that has been widely used in other places. We use some elements of that here. It can be very effective. I think one of the comments I would make is that we do a lot of data gathering, but maybe we don't have enough what I would call analysts within the police department who are actually using that information to make better decisions about staffing, both location and time and those kinds of issues. So the core infrastructure is there, but I don't think we really have the experience and so far the will to really implement a lot.
Thank you, sir. Time. I have another question.
Good evening. This question's for Ms. Dabowski. You talk about diversity and your neighbor, and I'm looking at a current ad that you talk about that was put out related to you, that you protect the First Amendment rights, but you'll veto any homosexual ordinance. Gays are part of this community, they contribute and so forth. They're saying that you don't recognize them as an equal neighbor and a part of this community. Can you address this ad?
Trevor, I appreciate that question, and that ad did not come from me or my campaign.
But what's your stance?
My stance is very simple. You know, in 2012, the city of Anchorage overwhelmingly, by about 58-60%, voted down Proposition 5. And because of that, I don't believe in discrimination, but that includes religious discrimination. So my stance is very simple. If Prop 5 were to come across my desk, I would veto it.
Let me take this one. We need to have a mayor who stands up for everybody here. I don't care who you love, what you look like, how you worship, where you came from. You all get equal rights.
And let me piggyback on that. We all deserve equal rights regardless of what sex you are. If you're homosexual, we all deserve equal rights, and that's a solid thing, regardless of what your identity is and everything, right? But that doesn't say to churches that you're going to lose your First Amendment right because you now have to not offend people for saying the truth in love. But check this too, and I'm going to piggyback on one more thing I just said. Every individual that's conceived in this nation deserves to be alive. and 1,600 babies are killed every year in Alaska. Most of those happen in Anchorage, and most of those happen on 40th and Lake Otis.
Thank you, sir.
That place has got to be shut down.
Thank you very
and
much
I'm
for
going to do
your
that as
answer.
mayor.
Thank you, sir.
Don, I have to jump in here since I'm the only candidate up here that's actively been working on LGBT issues over the last 2 years.
Yes. All right. Let's do it like this. You got 30 seconds, so let's
just agree this. Let's just agree for this. Yes, as Ethan said, we need a mayor who supports equality, that embraces, as Trevor said, everyone in this community, regardless of your sex, your gender, anything. And over the last 2 years as president of the Anchorage Chamber of Commerce, we became the first chamber of commerce in the country to ever invite the president of the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce to speak to our members. We're the first chamber of commerce to ever launch a special LGBT community outreach to the business community. So it takes a leader who's actually led.
All right, we got another question for you. Go ahead.
I just had a comment, I guess. A lot of you have talked about reaching out to the Native community here in Anchorage, and you know, there's a large rural to urban migration that we have in our state. So a lot of people in Anchorage belong to a tribe that might not be here in Anchorage. You know, they might not be part of the Klutna. So I would just keep that in mind when you're reaching out to the tribal community. And my question is on sales tax, and if you would support a sales tax in Anchorage to diversify revenue streams.
I absolutely would support a sales tax, but at no time would I want to have a sales tax and a property tax. The current administration has actually put a large amount of money into doing a study, and it can be achieved. And I believe that if we implement a sales tax and just get rid of all property taxes, that would boost the morale of our city, and we could slowly wean off of things that we do not absolutely need.
Would anyone else like to address the question?
What's this?
Yes, I would like to address that question. I would eliminate both. I'm not for sales tax, and I'm not for property tax. Education does not need to be funded from property tax. The whole thing is archaic. I will eliminate most taxation in Anchorage. Education is the key. Employment is the answer.
I think we could probably all recite your stance, and I appreciate it. We're going to move along. I'm going to try to keep it as close as possible to the mic. Go ahead, sir.
I'm just curious. Does any or do any of you actually oppose the Uber movement and would actually veto any other ordinances? Because I mean, they've already gone, and we'd love to have them back. But do any of you really not like Uber?
I think Uber's great.
And why?
I think we should get it going in here. I know a guy at church that he worked with Uber. It was a good job.
Now, I haven't weighed in on this yet, so maybe I can have a short turn. The only things that should be required would be things that are public safety. They need to make sure they've got commercial insurance, so if there's an accident and the passenger's injured. They need to make sure that the people driving are not going to sexually assault or abuse people that happen to get into their cab. They just need to do these basic public safety things, and then fine, come on down.
The key to Uber is electing a mayor who actually wants to invite innovative companies to Alaska. I mean, over the last 4 months, Uber has given over 10,000 free rides. I mean, you haven't had any problems. And the key is to elect the next mayor who hasn't been a lifetime lobbyist for the taxi cab industry.
I agree. Mr. Halcrow, I represented them when Miss Osiander tried to adjust the Title 11. When Uber came to town, it was 9 months after the work was done. I have nothing to do with Uber up or down. What I'm talking about to you is public safety. And is it unreasonable to suggest that people who transport other people for money at least have minimal basic public safety? And by the way, there have been problems with what's gone on. There's unlicensed people driving. There's people who have been suspended from driving by the Public Transportation Commission. So it's not all roses. It's just simple basic public safety and public protection.
All right, thank you. We'll go to the next question.
Thank you guys for coming tonight. Timothy, well, I guess a few people have mentioned the minority staffing in a way to help the police department physically look like the communities they serve and protect. My question is more, until that happens, right? Until we wave the wand and the police department looks like the community, how would you work with Chief Mew to maybe implement some policies within the police department to create a culture that is maybe informed and culturally sensitive to the population that are starting to feel disenfranchised?
I've actually applied for the APD, so I could speak really plainly to you on the application process. I got pretty far into it. I didn't wind up getting selected in the end, but they have a fair process of selecting individuals, and anybody can apply. So I'd say, just right now, grassroots style, because this is a grassroots kind of event, I just say, tell your friends to apply if they're white, yellow, black, anything.
I'd like to speak to that too. I'd like to see a citizens advisory board formed between the minority groups to review some of the practices of APD and also have some decision making in the process of hiring minorities.
Awesome. Thank you. We've got another question.
I'd like to chime in on the answer, please, on the question, if you don't mind. I think the police department is a very good department overall nationwide and has done a very good job to try to recruit folks. It may come down to credibilities, abilities, backgrounds, and those sort of things. But where we can help with that, it won't be right away, but something that goes back to where we could develop educational programs to start a process of, through education through our youth. There used to be, I know, in New York City, they have the PAL program, the Police Athletic League, and those type of programs can be added to it. And also we have the CSO, the Community Service Officer program. Why can't we get minorities in there and start acting up within the neighborhoods that they're going to be, possibly in the future, be officers in those neighborhoods?
Thank you. Our next question.
My question is regarding economic development, particularly on the east side, particularly Mountain View and Muldoon. A lot of the people there are unable to provide for their families and whatnot, and so they turn to the black market, such as drugs, which produces more violence. Does anyone have any, ideas to promote more economic development to reduce these types of violence?
I'll go ahead and jump in on that. I think there's long-term and short-term, right? Short-term is, there are things that we can do right now in terms of trying to attract additional businesses. Longer term, it's also about developing that community, right? One of the things I've been working on for the last year and a half is a program to give computers and internet access for free to students at Muldoon Elementary who take a basic programming class. So we looked at this in terms of the technology community locally can't get good people. So we're trying to get good people now, but we're also trying to build a crop, for the next 30 years.
Yeah, I just want to quickly, there's a child care component to anybody taking a low-paying job. I mean, that is a big problem, making sure that your kid is taken care of, and at the same time you're earning enough to cover that. And until we address that, particularly in that part of town, it's going to be very difficult for folks to leave their kids in places where child care occurs. And plus we need to start paying the child care providers a little bit more than $10.94 an hour.
I'd like to also say that we need to work on some of the problems of income inequality in our community. We need better wages for people and better jobs. So we need to work with the chamber and other businesses to bring some better jobs for people, provide some additional training. But wage inequality and wealth inequality are some of the leading factors of homelessness and other issues that people are facing in those parts of town.
We need to bring manufacturing to Anchorage and to Alaska. The way to do that is to create a low-cost electrical power grid.
Thank you, sir. We have another question here.
As a young teen myself, I was just wondering how you guys would get teenagers and young adults involved in more of the community, how you guys would reach out to us.
I plan on opening a facility that'll be open 24 hours a day for, and it kind of answers your questions, a positive place. It's not based on an alcohol tax or based on some kind of revenue system that people call a sin tax or whatnot. I think that we need to spend less money into situations that say inebriates and whatnot, and let's focus on the people who are doing the right thing. They're just looking for something to do. And why don't we put a few bucks into staffing say an elementary school and just keep it open 24 hours a day so people can go and recreate with a few security guards with so it's safe and secure.
All right, thank you so much. Guys, I want to remind you to try your best to keep your responses at or around 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me
want to
respond to that?
Go
One
ahead.
too, if I might. Through the Park Department and the Rasmussen Trust and the Park Foundation, there's summer intern jobs that pay for kids to work in the parks and stuff. It's fairly well paying and gives them job experience. I also met with the university and talked about bringing interns into the city government so that it can gain some job experience and help us do things. And those are both sorts of programs that I think you're asking about that give people job experiences, give them a little income, and then advance the interests of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question.
I'd like to direct this question to Mr. Coffey, right here in the middle.
I can't. There you are.
Right here.
I got you.
All right. I moved to this community back in 1996. I grew up in one of the most violent communities in the country, Detroit, Michigan. I moved my family here because I saw a news, it was actually coverage of the police responding to what I would call 7-Eleven, where I come from, but now it's, Tesoro or something like that. The police responded to a shooting at one of the 7-Eleven/Tesoros.
Yes.
And I called my family in the living room and I said, look, we've been all over the country. I'm retired military as well. And this is the first time that I had seen a community response to something like this, wherever we've been. So we decided to live here. Now that we see the things that are happening in the last couple months here, I'm really nervous about where our community is going.
Yeah.
And I'm signing up to help fix things. But there's a mentality that's coming into our community as well. There is a diversity situation, okay, with our police force looking like the rest of us. But there's a mentality that's moving in. There are people moving into our community from economically depressed areas that have a different way of thinking. They don't have a sense of worth for not themselves or the things that we're working for in our community. I say all of that to get to this point. We have to bring police officers into our community that understand those mentalities that are being brought in. So do you, Mr. Coffey, see a situation where you'll go to the lower 48 and create incentive programs to bring officers into our community, experienced officers, to help move us forward in how we deal with these crimes?
That's a more complicated question, but part of it is retention of existing officers. Part of it is recruiting officers from our community because they know our community. Experienced officers from elsewhere certainly can be of a benefit to us, but what I would look for is a police department that looks a lot more like our community, number one, and number two, when we select our police officers, I would like to see more involvement by the community so that we can identify the kinds of things you just talked about without destroying the way in which we select police officers, which has resulted in a pretty fine police department for many years.
Let me just jump in here for a second.
Go ahead.
Part of what we need to do is make sure that there's language access, that the police are able to talk to the people that they're interacting with. And that's a very big thing in a community as diverse as ours. The president just came forward with a task force that was released a couple weeks ago. And that task force was very specific about the recommendations it had about the interactions between the police and new immigrants to our country. And so those recommendations are recommendations that we ought to pay close attention to as we build a police force that looks more like our community.
One of the challenges with recruiting officers is about 10 years ago the state changed the retirement package from a defined benefit to a defined contribution. In what some folks don't know about police officers is they don't get Social Security. And so when they retire, all they have is the cash on hand in their investments. There's no third leg. And so when you go out and try and recruit officers, when other jurisdictions are offering a defined benefit retirement package, you can't compete. And so what's happening is we are investing over $100,000 to train and equip a new officer. They'll stay for 5 years and then leave to another jurisdiction that has a more favorable retirement program. So it's a problem.
Liz, when you said that was all for the public forum, 10 more minutes. 6 more minutes.
Could I please chime in on the question of...
We'll let him finish it up. Go ahead. You wanted to chime in really fast? That's going to be our final question, Liz. That's going to be our final question. Go ahead, make it real fast.
Yeah, I'd like to address your question, and I think it has to do more with leadership in the community. We can't always rely on the police and how much police we're going to get. In fact, we do need to increase the police, but you being a military retired guy, as well as I am, take a role, be a leader in the community, and get the neighborhoods organized to be part of it. In my street, in Eastwood on East Anchorage, we hold block parties every year, every summer. And that's how I get to know my neighbors, how we communicate. If a crime happens, like the double homicide up the block, we report, we help. And that's what we did on this.
Speaking of block parties, we're going to be having the mega block party coming up here in a few months. We did it last year during the summer. We had over 2,000 people that came on Spinard. We got a whole new location. We're actually going to be taking it to the Northway Mall parking lot to the east side of town. So we'll give you guys more information about that. I just got clear to do a couple of more questions real fast. Go.
Just real quick for Mr. Ahern, I was wondering what your role was in the SAP upgrade and the current status of that.
So I get asked that a lot, as you might expect. I've got a very detailed 6-page document on my campaign website. There's no other way to say it except I don't feel that I have the level of responsibility for what's going on that may be apparent from reading the newspaper. I'll probably be talking much more about this in the next 2 weeks before, but I only have 30 seconds here. I'd love to talk to you outside. I'd give you a lot of details.
Okay. Hi. We all know that sexual violence is a really big issue in Anchorage, and Aaron's Law is pending down in Juneau right now. And so I was wondering, what's your stance on Aaron's Law, and what are you doing to remove that pending status, either pro or con?
Sexual assault is one of the top issues that we have to address. We have the highest sexual assault rate per capita in the nation, and it's just completely unacceptable. As far as the details on Aaron's Law, I've heard a little bit about it, but maybe you know something more about Aaron's Law.
Oh, way to put her on the spot. Wow. If you'd like to chime in, go ahead.
Well, I will chime in quickly. I'm not an expert in Aaron's Law, but I did meet her last year when I was down in Juneau. An incredible woman with an incredible story, and I have been supportive.
Hi, my name's Agatha. I just had a quick question. I kept waiting for it to come up and it didn't. As a younger Native woman in this city, one thing that I haven't heard addressed here yet is sexual violence against women and abuse. And I want to know what you would do to make it easier for women who have been either abused or sexually assaulted to report that and feel comfortable and safe doing so.
I think the biggest concern with domestic violence is the fact that a lot of times the victim feels they can't leave for whatever reason. I think what we need to do is we obviously need to reinforce what our nonprofits like Awake and others are doing. I mean, Awake is at capacity almost every night. And the domestic violence in this town, we've grappled for this for decades. And the challenge has to be, again, a combination of education, prevention efforts, and really to make it very clear to victims of domestic violence that they have a place to go and they have those channels to take to get out of that relationship. We all know it's much easier said than done, but we just have to make sure we have a very strong support system so when they're ready to leave, they have a place to go and it's safe.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jennifer and I work for the Anchorage Police Department, and I was just listening to the gentleman's comment who came from Michigan. And I was actually just reading through all of our questionnaires to our recruits who are about to graduate here in a few weeks.
And I think what was really exciting about reading through their questionnaires, one of the questions is, where did you come from and how long have you lived in Anchorage? And I am pleased to say that we have, coming up, graduating really soon, people from all sorts of backgrounds, from all sorts of places, all over the world, who are interested in coming to the police department, and they're about to join our forces and get out on the street. But I will say that in my time, our recruitment unit actually kind of just got back up and working a couple of years ago, and that is a question that they have struggled with to identify is why can't we get more people locally interested in policing? And I think that's something that we're very interested in learning, and that would be a great community forum to work with. Yeah, absolutely. Because we would love to see more people locally, and we would like to concentrate more of that recruitment here than having to go outside. But I do wanted to let you know that we do have some great diversity coming to the department from people from all sorts of different places with all sorts of different backgrounds and other career backgrounds besides just policing. And I, as a young Anchorage citizen, look forward to seeing what that's going to do and add to the current police department. So get with me and let's talk about how we can get more local people and minorities involved in becoming police officers, because I think that would be awesome.
That's what it's all about. Communication. I'm going to try to grab one or two more really, really fast. The folks that haven't had their hand up, I hadn't had a chance to get by. Who? Which guy? This guy or this guy? Oh, that's a girl. I'm sorry. I was kidding. Sir, you ready? We'll make this real fast. Do you think?
This question is for Mr. Halker or Mr. Berkowitz. Either of you want to take it. I think we all recognize that police resources are finite. In consideration of that fact, the APD still allocates time and resources towards the prosecution of sometimes non-violent crimes like minor drug possession or prostitution. So as mayor, would you be interested in trying to encourage APD to prioritize cases to more serious, or would you across the board?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think APD is prioritizing calls. I mean, when you have 22 officers on a shift covering an area from McCluton to McHugh Creek, that's the reason there's no police protection downtown on Friday and Saturday, is because these men and women are out addressing domestic violence and robbery calls. It is limited resources, but you have to allocate those resources appropriately. And I currently believe the police department is doing absolutely the best they can, short-staffed and very thinly stretched, to allocate those resources. As we see with the legalization of marijuana, you're going to start to see more civil citations than anything. With regards to prostitution, there's a huge sex trafficking ring to that. That's not something I'm willing to let up on, because what we don't know is below the surface of this community, there is a pretty significant sex trafficking problem, and that's something that manifests itself through prostitution, and that is something we just simply can't ignore.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, really fast, we're going to give each candidate 30 seconds to say whatever it is that they need to say to you before they go. All right? Lance Ahern, you guys give him a big round of applause. Please go ahead, Lance. It's your floor.
I'll make it quick. You can read my bio online. I didn't get any questions about homelessness. And one of the things that I try to point out to people is that there is plenty of money in this town. If you look around town at all the commercial buildings going up, there's tons of money. It's not going to some of the places we need it because there isn't the return on investment. The mayor has a leadership role in the city in setting policy, working with community development, and some of the local providers to basically redirect and maybe change how the investment is happening and really mitigate that problem.
Thank you so much. This is Paul Bauer. Paul Bauer, go ahead. You got 30 seconds.
Yes, the mayor's position is a managerial position. It's, I hope when you look at all, if you're really serious about the next mayor and the crisis that's going to come to the city, you need to really look at the resumes and the people's experiences. And of course, the websites and other communications is the best way to do that. But really dig deep into folks that have backgrounds that can be managers and leaders of an administration that's going to deal with department heads to get things moving in the city, including jobs, and increasing our public safety. So please take a hard look at that.
Thank you. Ethan Berkowitz. Feel free, Ethan.
Well, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. This is one of the reasons why it's so great living in Anchorage. And people ask me why I want to run for mayor now, and I say, DC is dysfunctional. Juneau is broke and broken, and it's up to us.
So it's all on us. We get to write who we're going to be and where we're going to go. And that is a tremendously exciting time. So I'm looking forward to working with each and every one of you, hearing from each and every one of you, and making Anchorage as great as it can be, because we are Anchorage.
Thank you.
Please show your love for Mr. Dan Coffey, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know. Let's see. Yours been going well.
Is this work? Yeah, there it is.
Loud, clear.
Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you for listening to us and the questions and so on. What I do, because I've been a lawyer for 40 years, is when I have questions like the ones your group, We Are Anchorage, sent me, I prepared a document to respond to that. I made 40 copies. They're out on the table out there. If you want to see where I stand on these issues, and you want to do it in less than 30 seconds or 60 seconds, you want to give an opportunity for reading and understanding the way I look at these things, I would suggest that you pick it up, take your time, read it. It's available to all of you who are interested.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dustin Darden. 30 seconds, Dustin.
We start now?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I want to work with you guys. I'm the only viable candidate that is going to stand up for the working people to the CEO and everybody in between. I want to work with you to build the city into a brighter place that we can be proud of.
Thank you, Dustin. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Amy Dembowski.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting us and letting us sit before you and talk. You know, the one thing I love about this community is every single day we get to come together and we get to discuss the issues. Sometimes we're not going to agree on how to get there, but ultimately I think many of us sitting here today agree public safety is our #1 issue facing this community, but the police can't do it alone. It takes every single one of us to get involved, whether it's helping educate kids, whether it's investing in prevention programs, or whether it's, you know, helping the police. So that's why I say I appreciate the communication. Thank you for having us. It's been a wonderful discussion.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Andrew Hallcrow.
I grew up about a mile just due southwest of here on Needle Circle, right off Tier Road. I mean, this is an amazing community I've watched for 50 years, and it's changed. And the problem is leadership in this city hasn't changed. And if we're going to change leadership, we need to elect a leader who's actually had on-the-ground experience working on these issues. Diversity, public safety downtown, economic development, education. That's what I've been working on the last several years. And that's what you need as a mayor, is somebody who understands not just what's happening on the surface with the glittering generalities. You need a mayor who understands the mechanics that's happening below the surface. Because as mayor, I can grow an economy when you have a healthy community, but no mayor can grow an economy if you have an unsafe and unhealthy community. And please visit my website for all kinds of information. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Timothy Hewitt.
I'd like to thank you all for coming, and this really warms my heart that you're all here and care about this community. We all got to work together to make it a better community, and if elected mayor, I plan to lead this community by integrity, honesty, and transparency, and work together with everybody. Listen, be inclusive, and make decisions by consensus. Thank you for coming tonight. I really appreciate all of you. Thank you.
And last but not least, Mr. Phil Stoddard.
I'd like to thank the sponsors of this event for putting it on. The Bering Strait Native Corporation, to Joan standing behind me. And I'd like to thank you folks for coming out. I would like to have seen more Anchoragites come to this forum, but it's been good. And you can visit my website, googlegrease.com, if you want any more information about me. And besides that, I've listened to all these folks up here speak. I tell you what, I think Ethan's got the best managerial philosophy for the job.
Guys, give it up for all of these fantastic candidates for mayor. Stand up, man. Come on. Give them a big round of applause for coming out, hanging out with us today. You guys stand up too. Thank you all for coming out. All of our folks from We Are Anchorage, stand up. Thank you all for helping us out. And don't forget, for a complete list of all the answers to all the questions, visit our website, weareanchorage.org. You can get it all there. Transcripts from tonight, they will also be there, weareanchorage.org. Once again, thank you guys so much. And good luck to all of our candidates. God bless you. Good night. You guys drive home safe. Don't forget, weareanchorage.org. We Are Anchorage. Thank you.